Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Fox 43 Capitol Beat, where we go beyond the bills for an inside look at Pennsylvania politics and government. Our guest today is from Dauphin County, state representative covering Lower Paxton Township. Andrew Lewis joining us right now. Good to see you once again. How are you?
You as well, Matt. I'm doing well, and it's exciting. It's Thanksgiving week. How have you been?
You know what? I am so looking forward to being able to do Thanksgiving with my extended family. We are a Thanksgiving family where we eat a lot and we drink a lot and we watch a
Nice.
lot of football. I mean, it's
Yep.
very cliche, but that's our wheelhouse. What about you? Are you more Thanksgiving or Christmas?
We're more on the Christmas side, but we love Thanksgiving. My wife is a trained chef. She's going to be making a great sweet potato souffle. She's got amazing recipes. I think some of her family's coming in, so we're going to have a great time.
I know I brought you on to talk about what's going on with you, but I'm now more interested in talking about your wife.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's get into this a little bit.
Yeah.
She's a trained chef, like an actual chef.
Yeah, well, kind of. Yeah, she went through a culinary program when she was younger and trained under one of the most top chefs in Indianapolis. And she just does great dishes, food. It's every day is an amazing day at my house.
What's the highlight, Thanksgiving wise?
So, okay, so her turkey is amazing. I mean, she just knows how to do a turkey, which takes a special skill. But I would say her baked goods are amazing. She does a phenomenal. She does cakes. She does pies. She does pretty much everything. But that sweet potato souffle, probably my favorite. I'm telling you, Matt, you're gonna have to come over at some point.
Well, I mean, let's pull the veil off here. You are my state representative. I do live in your district, so I know I'm not. Yeah, constituent services. Listen, we will leave the. I know there's talk in the legislature now about gift bans. We'll leave that off to the side and media gifts and all that stuff. Listen, all in the name of Thanksgiving.
That's right.
No, but seriously, it is great to have you as well. Right now in Pennsylvania politics, I mean, this is an interesting time. You're now 3 years into
That's right.
Your time. This is your second term. How would you describe where Pennsylvania state government is now from just like an everyday perspective compared to what you thought it would be when you started back in 2018?
Yeah, well, I think we're in a totally different universe today than we were in 2018, and I think that I guess you could say the public awareness, the public consciousness of their government and how it affects their daily life has just completely changed and has evolved into being, I would say, much more. Most people are much more engaged now, much more in tune with what's going on in government, much more concerned about it, and they've seen how government action and policy has affected their everyday ability to generate an income, ability to have spending power for the dollars they spend, things like that. So I say it's a totally different universe that we're in today than we were in 2018.
Do you prefer it that way, that the average person is more kind of in tune with what is going on with each piece of legislation and activism and things of that nature?
You know, I do. I think that citizen engagement is huge, and it's what our whole country was kind of like founded on, this idea of the government of, for, and by the people. And so when people are involved, then I think we're all better off for that, because when you have especially folks who've been in politics for a long time, who've been somewhat insulated from everyday life, then oftentimes decisions made in government are not always the best, unfortunately, for how they affect everyday lives. But when people are involved and engaged, and there's kind of a citizen legislature interacting every day with the people, now you've got policy that's going to be better, because it's going to have a better outcome and therefore affect people's lives in better ways. So I do think this is a better way for society to move forward, where citizens are engaged in government.
It seems as though, at least from a relation standpoint with Democrats and Republicans, it seems as though that has deteriorated over the last few years. Are you kind of seeing the same thing on the floor?
I am, and it's unfortunate. A lot of the legislation we pass, the majority of the legislation we pass is bipartisan. The majority of legislation we passed is overwhelmingly bipartisan, but I've got to say it does seem like we're in a polarized environment, and even more so now than a couple of years ago. And it's something that we certainly have to take a look at and get back to the basics of governing. And my whole kind of mantra on that front is, Matt, I'm a limited government advocate. So I'm an advocate of kind of pulling back the size and scope of government. And I feel like when government affects less people's lives, there's more we can agree on, because we're back to the basics of, hey, let's make sure we have good roads and good law enforcement and good justice in society and things like that.
Why do you think that has become the way it's become over the last few years? Why do you think that those relationships have deteriorated?
There's been a couple reasons. So number one, I think we've seen this trend, and you can measure the size of government by the amount of money that the government spends. And you've seen this trend just starting years ago, but every year there's more and more spending, government's getting bigger, therefore affecting more aspects of society, and then there's more to disagree on. So the bigger government gets and the more that it affects people's lives, the more that the policymakers are going to disagree. So that's the one problem we have, is government's getting too big. Number two, we've seen this, I would say the COVID environment has really kind of created a hyperpolarization, because it felt like for a lot of folks during COVID, on the one hand, you had a segment feeling like, all right, well, this group isn't taking COVID seriously. And then on the other hand, on this side, it felt like, well, these people are shutting down my ability to generate an income and feed my family. So you had this huge kind of almost chasm, where I feel like we would have been better off just to be talking to each other and understanding where each other were coming from. But I got to say, the COVID era really, to me, kind of exacerbated this polarization that we're in.
Did it affect your relationships with people on the other side of the aisle? How would you describe your relationships with Democrats right now?
Yeah, I would say my relationships with Democrats are good. I have one-on-one relationships with folks that really weren't affected, because kind of the folks that I get along with best on the other side of the aisle, you can kind of separate issues, right? Like, okay, we disagree over here on these 5 things. We agree on this one. Let's work on this one. We may even disagree on the how-to, but at least we agree that this is a fundamental problem in society, and we agree that we want to solve it. So we've been able to you can kind of compartmentalize your disagreements. And I've been able to do that, and the folks that I get along with have been able to do that. It's not always the case with everybody. At the end of the day, the first thing we need to understand is like the humanity of the person on that other side of the issue, right? Like they're a person.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I want to get at, because no one likes to see the fighting. I mean, or maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just a pacifist, and I hate when people fight. But I mean, so take you for example. You have a family, you have a wife, you have children, just like people on the other side of the aisle. So does that come up with your relationships? Do you share friendships with people on the other side of the aisle, or is it strictly business when you're inside the Capitol?
No, I think there is an element of the human aspect. I mean, I think of like Rep. Solomon. He's a military guy like I am, and we both have served. So we'll have conversations about military careers and being in the reserves versus the National Guard and things like that, to where those human elements, they actually transcend, they supersede a lot of the political elements, which then kind of don't seem as big of an issue when you're talking to someone as a parent or as a son or as a grandson or as a grandparent versus just someone you disagree with. It puts everything in a totally different lens.
One of the things that has really been a point of huge contention over the last year and a half are the Republicans in the state house and Senate using constitutional amendments to change certain rules and kind of bypassing the governor. And I had State Senator Katie Muth on the program last week, who referred to it as an abuse of power. And I just wanted to you're my first guest since having that conversation. And I wanted to get your response as a Republican in the state house to someone saying that is an abuse of power.
Sure, that would be no different than calling a veto an abuse of power when the governor vetoes legislation. It's important to recognize that, which by the way is not the case. I think that a lot of times Vetoes are a check on legislative power. The legislature has a veto override mechanism to check executive power. The judicial branch has their ability to check both legislative and executive power. And then finally, the people have a check on all that power through the constitutional amendment process. So I think it's important to recognize that the framers and the folks who've gone before us have kind of set up this system where there's always a check on unilateral government power, and say the legislature passes something, the governor can veto it. We've gone through that, but now you've got the constitutional amendment process. It's just another way that the citizens can always check government power. And I would say if for everyone who's pro direct democracy, which is somewhat different than a constitutional republic, this is almost the purest form of democracy you can have, where the citizens truly get to come to the ballot box and amend their own constitution.
Is there a place where do Republicans prefer the constitutional amendment method over getting something that has more Democratic support to the governor's desk?
I will speak for myself. I prefer legislation to go through and get signed by the governor. I said, one, it doesn't take as long. The constitutional amendment process has to be identical bills in 2 sessions. Mm-hmm. with majority support in both chambers. No, I would much prefer to see legislation go through, be signed by the governor, become law. I will say with respect to limiting executive power, some of these things do belong in the Constitution because it's kind of this permanent check on overwhelming executive power. So I think that some of those things do belong in the Constitution, but no, for the majority of issues, I'd love to see the legislation pass through normal statutory methods and then signed by the governor.
Do you think enough is being done by Republicans and Democrats to maybe find more of that common ground? Maybe it doesn't end up being something that Republicans want all the way, but it's more palatable for the Democratic Party that assuredly doesn't want this to go to a constitutional amendment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of issues that you've seen that play out where we're working across the aisle. Both parties are working together. The legislation I point to is the extension of these regulatory waivers during the COVID pandemic. I mean, that was a joint effort to extend that with the House, the Senate, the governor's office. We passed it with both parties, actually unanimous vote in the House, got it through, the governor signed it. So that does occur. And then there are every now and then, rarely, but every now and then you have an issue where you kind of reach an impasse. And so you've got to take it to the people and say, all right, well, let's let the citizens decide. And I frankly think, contrary to what Senator Muth said, I think instead of this being an abuse of power, it's almost the ultimate of ensuring the citizens have the power.
I want to ask you about the gun legislation, that passed the House last week, the concealed carry. Republicans have called it constitutional carry. Sure. Regardless of how you put it, it's something that the governor is going to veto. He's already come out and said this. So why are Republicans going ahead and doing something that is going to, you don't have enough votes to override a veto, is going to get vetoed? Why are you going about doing this instead of working on something that isn't going to automatically get vetoed as soon as it gets to the governor's desk?
Sure. So there are a few schools of thought on this. My thought, when I look at what is a legislator's role, what is the legislature's role, I always look at, okay, I am held accountable for what I do. Now, I'm not accountable for what the governor does or what he agrees with or what he'll sign. I'm accountable to support legislation when it comes to the floor that I agree with, and then to introduce and author legislation that I think would move our society in the right direction. And oftentimes my policy objectives would conflict with the governor's, but I was elected to represent the 105th district. The governor was elected, as an executive for the state. And so my goal is always to just do what I think is best for my constituents and for the state of Pennsylvania, because I'm accountable for what Andrew does, but I'm not accountable for what Governor Wolf does. So I think a lot of times we come together as all two branches of government, but both chambers and the governor, we sign legislation, we get it done. And then there's times where the legislature does something and then maybe the governor disagrees, but we can't always just govern based on what the governor wants, because then you just become this autocracy and you don't truly have a contrast of policy visions.
You represent a district though, and again, full disclosure,
sure,
you are my constituent. I live in your district, but this question comes from a person as a journalist who covers the state capitol and not someone that lives in your district.
Yeah.
You represent a district which is one of the most split districts in the state. So do you feel pressure, or why not? Do you feel pressure to vote the ways of half of your district and what they might want compared to what just your party might want?
Yeah, so how I look at this, and I'm very proud of my district. I think of us like a microcosm of America. There's a couple farms, suburban areas, some urban areas. We've got a very mixed district, and we do have about almost an even split of Republicans and Democrats. So I think of us as almost like this purple district, and I love our district for those reasons. But what I got to say is, what I do is I lay out for my constituents, all of them, what I believe and what my kind of perspective on the role of government should be, and how I would vote on certain things. So I kind of lay that out for them on a consistent basis. And then when those individual specific laws come up or bills come up for voting, then I vote consistently with how I told them I would vote. And so some of them disagree and they'll tell me about it and we'll have conversations. Look, we've had some good conversations with folks on the very other end of the political spectrum from me. And I explained to them kind of what my rationale was for arriving at the decision I did. And if nothing else, I do always respect the other opinion. So I have an open door policy. Anyone who wants a meeting as a constituent is entitled to one. They come in, they can yell at me. I respect it. I respect where they're coming from. I talk about my end of it. And then we may agree to disagree, but it's respectfully. And a lot of times I'm upfront with my constituents that we might not agree, but here's my perspective. And I'm just transparent about what that perspective is.
You know what settles these debates better than anything else? Beer and wings at the Eagle Hotel. I think, listen, I'm making a push. I'm making a push for office hours with State Representative Andrew Lewis to be at the Eagle Hotel. The state can pay for the wings. I'll
cover the wings, Matt. I'll cover the wings.
We need to make this happen.
I think it's a good idea. Frankly, look, we jest, but this is actually, these type of sit downs are important. I had a constituent who's completely opposite politically from me, really said, look, I want to come in and talk to Andrew because I'm seeing some stuff on Facebook that, I don't agree with. And so I said, yes, of course I want to meet with her. We sat down, we had a phenomenal conversation. She told me her points of view. I then had a better understanding of how she felt. I told her my points of view. We both got it, it was one of those like almost tear up moments at the end because we were able to actually come together and have a good conversation. So to your point, wings and beer are probably a good idea.
I know you're big on education. Education has always been a big push for you. School choice, that is your MO. I wonder if you are paying any attention to what's happening right now in Commonwealth Court with the school funding debate and the lawsuit that's happening there, if you've paid any attention to that.
Yeah, I'm not super tuned into that lawsuit right now. I'm not.
When it comes to, I'm going to throw out a bill number, which I don't typically like doing, but just the HB 1332, which is your bill, which would require school districts to post all their curriculum online. It's on to the Senate. Have you heard anything of when the Senate plans to it already passed through Scott Martin's Education Committee. Do you have any idea when they plan to take that up, if they plan to take it up?
My understanding is they do plan to take it up, and it had been scheduled on the calendar, I think two or so weeks ago, and then there was a delay. I think it's going to come up here probably before the end of session. I do think there is a plan in the Senate to run that and pass it in the chamber.
Have you heard anything from the governor's office? Because that's something that no Democrats have gone on board with, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the governor is going to automatically veto it. I haven't seen anything from the governor yet. Have you heard anything from his office there?
I have not heard anything directly from him. I will say we amended this significantly in the Senate to, I worked with the folks over there to get it amended and to address the concerns that some folks on the other side of the aisle had. And once those concerns were addressed, my hope is the governor, because in its initial draft, I don't think he was going to sign it. I heard, I don't know if it might have even been a journalist who called their office and reported that he didn't plan to sign it. But now we've amended it in the Senate. We've addressed pretty much any and all concerns. So my hope is we get a signature on it.
What do you want to see from an education standpoint in the next in the year 2022, which is going to be one heck of a year. What do you want to see kind of as the next step realistically? What do you want to see as the next step in Pennsylvania education?
Yeah, I want to see more choice. I want to see more options and opportunities. And a lot of time, my big focus is often on these kids in underperforming schools or failing school districts whose mom or dad or both want them to get into a better school, and they don't have any options to do that. They really have no way. And my own educational journey was very unconventional. I was homeschooled. Then when I joined the Army, then I did my bachelor's degree through a lot of like online and CLEP. Then I did my master's at George Washington through night school. So I had a very like unconventional educational journey. And so I recognized the importance of having an educational model tailored to your specific needs. And I feel like for too many kids in Pennsylvania, they're kind of trapped in a situation that's not the best for them. And so we can't leave our public schools behind, right? Like we have to fully fund them and take care of our teachers. But there are those kids that it's not a good match for the school they're kind of in. And I want to see 2022 be that advent of changing that in Pennsylvania to where you're a Pennsylvania kid, it doesn't matter where you are, there's going to be at least some option that's going to work for you.
Do you have Yeah. I'm sorry. Do you have names on the other side of the aisle that you can work with on this? Because that is something that has been pretty polarizing of late.
Yeah, because the key thing with education policy is there's not like one component you can say, all right, we're just going to do more choice and have vouchers, because there's a lot of money then that's kind of redirected. And so what you need to then do is say, all right, look, let's make sure the money follows the student. And how you do that with a public education system is through fair funding formula. So I've talked to Rep. Cerisi. He's got a fair funding bill that I'm a co-sponsor of, because frankly, Central Dauphin would be getting $18 million more a year if we ran all the dollars through the fair funding formula, which is what is supposed to happen. But there's some policy tweaks that have to happen to make sure that occurs. So these are some areas we can work on. Educational policy, it can't happen in a vacuum. It can't just be charter reform or just be vouchers or just be fair funding. You have to put it all on the table. And I think that's where we find common ground with the other side of the aisle.
I want to kind of end on some fun, end on a high note. What is it about the next month, as we start with Thanksgiving and then we go to Christmas? What is it about the next month that that really kind of puts you in a good mood, good headspace?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of food and social interaction, because you think about it, pressure kind of lessens. In the business world, you're not as high strung because, people's workload kind of drops a little bit. They take a few days off here and there. So in that awesome environment of the holiday spirit, you're then enjoying some food, enjoying the beer and wings at the local pub. You're fellowshipping over holiday food. I just think it's the food and fellowship is fantastic throughout the month between kind of the Thanksgiving week and then the Christmas week.
And that's a great place to wrap things up here.
How about you, though, Matt? You got to tell us. For you, what's yours?
Oh, I mean, for me, it's the chance where I take all my vacation time during this stretch.
I feel like after this last year, you're in journalism, like you just take one long nap that's like 4 days long.
It's nice when you get to the end of the year and you realize that, oh, I have a lot more vacation time than I thought I did. I mentioned this to someone. I mentioned this to the woman who cuts my hair. I mean, I have to shave every day for work, and I have to wear makeup every day for work. So I'm off this year from December 15th until the 27th. So during that time, whenever I'm off for an extended period of time, I just don't shave. I like growing a little bit of a beard. And to me, that is that's my 12 days of Beardsmas. From December 15th to the 27th is going to be my 12 days of Beardsmas, Beardsmas, and that is what I'm looking forward to more than anything else. So
please tweet some selfies out, please. That's going to be amazing.
Yes, I mean, I have this full social media thing planned while I'm off during that time to still maintain my social media presence. But no, it's a fun time. The food, the family, all the cliche stuff. But it's true. It really is true. And we're pretty lucky. So you want to try to give back and help people out where you can as well. Absolutely. So that is, I think, a great place to wrap up. Dauphin County State Representative Andrew Lewis on the Fox 43 Capitol Beat. Sir, we'll see you around. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Matt.